Is LSU head coach Brian Kelly a legitimate candidate for the Michigan head coaching vacancy?
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, y'all? Welcome into Locked On LSU. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. You can also check us out on YouTube as well. So you can watch us in addition to listening to us, whatever your preferred podcast platform might be. You can throw us up on your smart TV, on your phone, on your laptop, however you like to watch. You can watch in addition to listening to the podcast. And of course, we are part of the Locked On Network, your team every single day. So at the time of recording, Jim Harbaugh to the Chargers is not officially official, but we all see the writing on the wall. We've seen the writing on the wall for the last few weeks and maybe even months that per Josina Anderson of the NFL Network, she said that she's hearing that the final conversations are underway. It was on NFL Network earlier today from Tom Pelissero that they were, quote, within striking distance of getting a deal done. So again, that is at time of recording. By the time you're listening to this, Jim Harbaugh to the Chargers could be a done deal. We know how quickly these things happen. But it does seem more likely, overwhelmingly more likely than not, that Jim Harbaugh is headed to the Los Angeles Chargers. That would leave a head coaching vacancy at Michigan. So, is Brian Kelly a legitimate candidate to be the next head coach at Michigan? To that, I say, sure, absolutely. I'm sure he is, because good coaches become candidates for head coaching vacancies, especially when there's other sort of ties there. Look at when Nick Saban left Alabama. The names that were coming out were all kind of the usual suspects. We're all coaches that either had proven track records or had gotten the hot name on the market. Lane Kiffin, Dan Lanning, Mike Norvell at Florida State, Steve Sarkisian at Texas. Names that made sense, names and coaches that had success and that had at least some tie to the University of Alabama in some way or another. So yeah, absolutely. I do think that Brian Kelly is a candidate to go to Michigan. One, given his background, that he had a lot of success coaching in and recruiting in that area of the country. If it wasn't Grand Valley State, it was Cincinnati. If it wasn't Cincinnati, it was at Notre Dame. That he has ties to the state of Michigan and the surrounding areas. So absolutely, he is a candidate because he is a good coach. He has proven that he can win at this level, that he's gotten teams to national championships, that he's proven that he can also do it at a second stop, that in 2 years at LSU, he has two back to back 10-win seasons, that he has a proven track record of taking over programs that might be left in disarray, whether that's with roster attrition, which of course we're seeing at Michigan. JJ McCarthy has entered the NFL draft, Blake Corum is entering the NFL draft, and that's just kind of just very tip of the iceberg there. But also, Michigan probably inevitably is going to be hit with NCAA violations. That's what LSU was dealing with when Brian Kelly came in. And what Brian Kelly brought in was a sense of organization and a sense of structure in a program that was lacking organization and structure. Of course, going back to the midpoint of the college football season, the Connor Stallion scandal, the Michigan sign stealing scandal, that the NCAA is still undergoing an investigation behind the sign stealing scandal and behind the Michigan football program. That there probably, more likely than not, will be some sort of violations, whether that's a bowl ban, whether that's scholarships being revoked. There's a pretty wide spectrum of what the NCAA can do. They're going to, take away a national championship. I mean, like the NCAA can only do a certain number of things, but the spectrum is wide. If you take away 5 scholarships, okay, we can deal with that. If you vacate wins and vacate a national championship, that might be a different story. A bowl ban might be a different story. Even Bruce Feldman of The Athletic, he put this out a couple weeks ago of, Who replaces Jim Harbaugh at Michigan if he indeed leaves Michigan to go to the NFL? As of now, that seems more likely than not. And Brian Kelly is on this list. Talks about the jump from South Bend to Baton Rouge. Uh, you know, his track record both at Notre Dame and at LSU. I mean, we know it. I don't have to explain it to you. So yes, I do think that Brian Kelly is a candidate. Does that mean that he is going to Michigan? No, it does not. We'll get into that coming up next. But absolutely, I do think that he is a candidate because candidate can mean a lot of different things. Candidate can mean a name of interest, a name that's probably going to be swirled around, whether it's amongst fan bases, whether it's amongst the conversations that college football insiders are having on radio shows and on TV shows, or whether it even is a name that comes up in conversations with the athletic director and with the president of the university. I think that candidate can mean all sorts of different things. So, yes, I do think that Brian Kelly will be painted, at least by the media, if it's not actual conversations that are happening in Ann Arbor, he will be painted as a candidate because he is a good coach and because he has ties to the state of Michigan. We will get into coming up next why I don't believe he's leaving for Michigan, but let's just for a second entertain the thought that he did. Let's just live in fantasy world. Let's live in gossip land because that is truly a place that I do love to live this time of year is gossip land and talk land because it is talking season. Let's say he does go to Michigan. Let's say Michigan blows him away. Let's say Brian Kelly is sick of trying to compete in the SEC because it's just too freaking difficult and it's only getting more difficult. What would happen to LSU? Well, I don't mean to sound crass here. I don't mean to say this with such a lack of eloquence. You'd be screwed. Like, let's be honest. If Brian Kelly did decide to leave this offseason to go to Michigan for whatever reason, you'd be screwed. Like, let's look at what's going on with Alabama right now. Now, I am by no means comparing Brian Kelly to Nick Saban, nor am I comparing the impact of Nick Saban leaving the Alabama football program to the impact of Brian Kelly leaving the LSU football program. Obviously, Nick Saban won 6 titles at Alabama. Brian Kelly hasn't done that yet at LSU. So the impact is different. I know, I understand. But I think that the same kind of logic applies to any coach that leaves any program. When a head coach recruits players and a head coach brings in coaches that recruit those players don't want to play for that program if those coaches aren't going to be there anymore. There is a sentiment of, commit to the school, don't commit to the coach. Pfft, get out of here. You commit to the coach. You commit to the coach that you believe is going to be able to maximize your potential and get you to the NFL and maximizing your earning potential, not just at the NFL level, but at the college level as well. You're not going somewhere with a coach that didn't recruit you. And of course, the assistants that recruited you probably aren't going to be there either. As we've seen, assistants likely, 95% of the time are not going to be retained. So you would now be left to find a new head coach. And right now is not necessarily really the time to do that. Look at Alabama's head coaching search. I just mentioned some of the hot names that kind of came up in the Alabama coaching search. Lane Kiffin is always going to come up in coaching searches. I don't want Lane Kiffin to be the head coach at LSU, but entertain me for a second. I don't think Lane Kiffin is going anywhere. I especially don't think that Lane Kiffin is going to go somewhere where he now has to compete against the roster that he has constructed at Ole Miss. Mike Norvell is another hot name. Well, Mike Norvell just got an extension and a raise after his name was kind of tied with the Alabama job. I don't think Mike Norvell is leaving that either. Uh, Dan Lanning is another name that also has popped up in head coaching vacancies. Dan Lanning also just got an extension and a raise. I don't think Dan Lanning is willing to jump ship from what he's building at Oregon to come to LSU and basically start all over again. So your head coaching pool has shrunk significantly. You also would be left, so you'd be left to find a head coach. That head coach would need to find assistant coaches that also had connections to the state of Louisiana. You would need to supplement your roster again. So overall, we know how difficult it is for a football program to undergo a coaching change, whether it's the greatest coach of all time, whether it's a really good coach, whether it's an average coach. It's hard to go through a coaching change. So if Brian Kelly did decide to leave for Michigan, you know what? Buckle up because times would be tough and life as an LSU football fan would kind of suck over the next couple of years. But I don't think that we have to worry about that. Genuinely, truly, from the bottom of my heart, I don't think that Brian Kelly would leave LSU for Michigan. And I'll explain why coming up next after just a couple of words from our sponsors. All right, I want to tell you about FanDuel Sportsbook because the regular season of the NFL has wrapped up, but some of my favorite games of the season are coming up, and it is conference championship weekend. So now is the perfect time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's right, $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. And the app is so easy to use, and there are so many different ways to bet, like live same game parlays. You can find bets in the new Explore tab. You can make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, which is the best way to find some popular parlays across the entire FanDuel Sportsbook. And there is so much more. So visit fanduel.com/locked on and make your first bet a layup. Again, that is fanduel.com/locked on. And new customers will get $150 back in bonus bets guaranteed. And all you have to do is place a $5 bet. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, thanks again for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, we are part of the Locked On Network, your team every single day. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every single league. So go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, rolling along here. Why I don't think Brian Kelly would leave LSU for Michigan. And I have several reasons why. And this is not me reporting that he's not going to. This is not me saying that I've heard from insiders that Brian Kelly absolutely positively would not make this move. This is just my interpretation of the situation. First and foremost, the number one reason why I don't think Brian Kelly would leave LSU to go to Michigan is, do you really want to start over? Like, do you really want to go through this again? You had a cushy job at Notre Dame. You could have kept that job, continued cruising along, winning 9, 10 games a year, getting to the college football playoff, and playing not really the hardest schedule in the world to get there. But Brian Kelly wanted to challenge himself, and he took on a massive challenge at LSU. He took over a team that only 40 scholarship players in a bowl game. He took over an LSU program that was in complete disarray, in complete disorganization, the way that the former regime had left it. LSU was facing looming NCAA violations, and it was scholarship violations. It wasn't, a bowl ban that you had to continue recruiting and selling players on a bowl ban that extended past the 2020 season, but it was still he took over a project of an LSU football program. He essentially rebuilt LSU from as close to the ground as you can possibly get back up. Now, I'm not going to act like Brian Kelly took over a roster with absolutely zero talent whatsoever. I mean, Garrett Nussmeier, now your starting quarterback, was on that roster. You had BJ Ojulari, who was the leader on your defense on that roster. So it's not like he took over nothing, but he had a lot of fixing to do, a lot of work to do, not just in terms of roster numbers, but basically he's said it himself. I'm going to reteach you how to practice. I'm going to reteach you, recoach you how to be part of this program. And this is the culture that I want to build. Brian Kelly has said it himself. I feel like we have the foundation built now in these first 2 years that now we're ready to ascend into serious national title contender. That he finally has LSU in a good place. If he left for Michigan, well, he would be doing all of that over again for the second time in 3 years. I can't imagine that's all that incredibly fun, nor can I imagine that it's easy, because it's not easy, especially in this day and age in college football, when a college football coach's job has never been more difficult than it is now. So you want to take over a Michigan team with no JJ McCarthy, with no Blake Corum that's going to be facing NCAA violations? You want to do that again? I wouldn't. I don't know what Brian Kelly wants to do. I can't speak for Brian Kelly. I can tell you what I would not want to do, and that is what I would not want to do. The other thing, NCAA violations looming at Michigan again due to the sign stealing scandal. He went through that. I don't think he wants to dive right back into that. I also think that's part of the reason why Jim Harbaugh is leaving Michigan. Is look, I won my championship. I'm out. Like I don't want to face this. Pete Carroll did the same thing at USC after he won his championships with USC, and they knew that there were violations coming down the pipe. He was like, "Look, I'm going to Seattle. Like I'm out. I don't want to do this anymore." The third thing, I think that Brian Kelly, I have to think he looks at recruiting in the state of Louisiana and says, "Damn, this is much better than recruiting in Central Indiana." That I have at my disposal, and I'm speaking on Brian Kelly's behalf, I have at my disposal 4 and 5-star talent in my backyard. Like kids that have dreamed their entire lives of playing in the purple and gold. That I don't really have to put the full court press on one of the top defensive players in America because he wants to play right here. And he lives just an hour down the street. That Louisiana is known, specifically South Louisiana, is known to have some of the best football talent, high school football talent across the country. That you have such a high density of incredible players centrally located in one area, in your backyard. Look, Michigan's a great brand, and there's a lot of talent in the state of Michigan. Look, Bryce Underwood is from Michigan. He's the number one quarterback recruit in the 2025 class, and he is coming to LSU. So don't get me wrong, it's not like Michigan, the state of Michigan is barren of talent. It's just Louisiana's different, that you have much more talent, especially with players that you might not really have to sell on LSU. Some you do. I'm not look. It's not easy to recruit, especially in the era of NIL when you can just open up the checkbook, and that might seem a whole lot more fun and intriguing than playing for the team that you've dreamed of playing your entire life. I understand that, but Louisiana's different. You get it. I get it. I know it. You know it. It's 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 almost easy, right? I know it's not. And I know that's easy for me to say sitting here talking into a microphone to say it's easy, but when you have that much talent, do you really want to leave that? So in-state talent I think is important. I think another thing, if Brian Kelly did indeed leave LSU to go to Michigan, there would be a narrative of he couldn't handle the SEC. He got a taste of what it's like to play an SEC schedule, to play in environments like Kyle Field and Bryant Denny. I got a taste of that and I'm not interested. That competing in the SEC is just a little bit too difficult. That this conference is too hard and it's only getting harder. That Brian Kelly wanted to come to LSU to have that challenge of winning in the hardest and most competitive conference in college sports. If you left for Michigan, the narrative would be Brian Kelly couldn't handle it. Brian Kelly, maybe had it a lot easier at Notre Dame in terms of scheduling and the path for Notre Dame. If you're getting past some service academies and Louisville here and there, it's not the same as playing the likes of Georgia and Alabama and Texas and Oklahoma and Texas A&M and Florida and so on and so forth. It's different. It's harder in the SEC. Now, I'm not saying that Brian Kelly should make career decisions just based off of his perception, but I think that it would be a bad look. Come to the SEC to be challenged 2 years later, you get scared out and you jump ship at your first opportunity. Not the best look for a coach who said he wanted to be challenged. So look, I don't think that he's going to leave. I don't. I've heard the rumors. I've heard the talk on social media. I've heard of where they came from. I get it. I know. It's just my interpretation of the situation. And again, Brian Kelly can do whatever the heck he wants. My interpretation of the situation is like you have it pretty good where you have it now. And you built that. You created that to an extent, Louisiana's always had talent. Brian Kelly didn't do that. But what Brian Kelly did do is get LSU to a point where it now has a very strong foundation built. You had 2 back-to-back 10-winning seasons. At LSU, they've won 3 national championships and been to more since Michigan won their last before this past year. The Michigan's won 1 national title in my lifetime, and LSU has won 3. I think that says something. Although I do think the path at Michigan probably is easier. That even with USC and UCLA and Washington and Oregon joining the conference, it's still no SEC. But I, for one, am not worried about Brian Kelly leaving because even though you would be screwed if he did, I don't think he's going to. But there is one important thing to keep in mind that coaches lie. And we will get into that coming up next. Okay, rolling along here and Locked On LSU, Jim Harbaugh at time of recording is not officially the head coach with the Los Angeles Chargers, but it seems like the writing's on the wall that it's going to happen. And Brian Kelly's name has been and will continue to be thrown out there as a candidate in Michigan. I'm not worried about it. I'm worried about it to an extent because he would be screwed, but I don't think he's going to go. I think that right now he's got it pretty good at LSU. That he's weathered the storm. That he's put in the work and had the late nights and early mornings just to establish a foundation. He's done that. And I think to a certain extent he's proven himself. But he hasn't done what I think he came to LSU to do, and that is win SEC championships, get to the college football playoff, and ultimately bring LSU another national title, to be the 4th head coach at LSU in a span of 4 coaches to bring a national title to LSU. So I don't think he's going to go to Michigan. But one thing that I do want you all to keep in mind is that coaches lie all the time. So if you say, well, I don't think Brian Kelly is going to leave LSU for Michigan because he said that this is the last stop on the Brian Kelly caravan, that he wants to stay here, that he wants to win a national championship at LSU. I don't buy that for a single second. That there are other reasons why I don't think Brian Kelly is going to Michigan. His word is not one of them. Let me remind you something that happened less than 20 years ago.
Yes, I have to say it. I'm not going to be the Alabama coach. What? I shouldn't even have to comment on this. I think I've said this over and over and over again.
I've said it over and over and over again. I am not going to be the next head coach at Alabama. Now, that was late December. January 3rd, it was announced that Nick Saban was going to be the next head coach at the University of Alabama. Let's bring it a little bit closer to home, a little bit more recent. Blake Baker signed a contract extension at Missouri. He tweeted out the clip from the movie The Wolf of Wall Street of, "I'm not effing leaving." He left. He's now the defensive coordinator at Missouri. Never take coaches by their word. Things change. Always, always think about it when coaches make a statement like that. I'm not leaving for Alabama right now. I'm not leaving yet. I'm not going anywhere until a better opportunity presents itself. So always keep that in mind. In this instance, though, I don't think that a better opportunity is presenting itself because I don't think that Michigan is a better opportunity. But hey, that's my thought. I fully believe that Brian Kelly is going to be in the purple and gold on the sidelines in 2024. Truly. I think Sharon Moore is going to be the next head coach at the University of Michigan, and I think that he's deserved it. I think that we're overcomplicating all of this, but hey, I love myself some good drama, especially when it comes after the regular season. But that's going to do it for me today. Thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, coming up in tomorrow's edition of Locked On LSU, I want to do kind of a state of the transfer portal because when Nick Saban retired, I expected some big splashes, some big names, maybe supplementing some positions of need. We haven't yet. Is Brian Kelly done in the transfer portal? Is that the right thing for this roster? We'll get into that on tomorrow's edition of Locked On LSU.